Do you remember Big It was a hit worth more than $100 million, the role that turned Tom Hanks into an icon the movie a whole generation grew up with? A 12-year-old boy makes a wish to grow up and wakes up in an adult body. It sounds like a fairy tale. You watch it, and it feels warm, funny, sweet. But let me ask you something. After all these years, are you sure you really understand Big behind that story that seems so gentle, are things that pull in the opposite direction? Versions that almost turn dark. Delicate details that if they had stayed in, would have buried the movie under spit and controversy. In this video are 20 facts like that. Weird, surprising, and sometimes a little uncomfortable. And trust me, after you finish this, you will not be able to look at Big with the innocent eyes of a child anymore. Ready? Let us open up weird fact number 20 right now. Number 20. Big almost became a horror movie. This is something that still gives me chills every time I think about it. Elizabeth Perkins once said that in her mind, if Robert De Niro had played Josh, Big would have been darker, heavier, and almost like a horror movie. Just hearing that makes me want to sit up straight. Because the movie we remember, the movie I love, does not carry that color at all. Big has lasted this long because it has warmth. It has awkwardness, innocence, that feeling of a child lost in an adult world, and you are laughing at him and feeling for him at the same time. Tom Hanks brought something very rare to this part: innocence, without foolishness, awkwardness, without making people uncomfortable. But if you swap that out for an energy that is rougher, heavier, tighter, I honestly think Big could very well have turned into just one more oddball 80s premise and then disappeared in the pile of half-dark, half-strange movies from that same era. Some premises sound terrific on paper, but if the rhythm is even slightly off, magic turns into unease. And that is the part that gives me goosebumps. Just change one face, and the soul of the whole movie can change with it. But wait. The Robert De Niro angle still is not the strangest turn this project almost took, because if you dig down one layer deeper, you run into something even harder to believe: Josh's original gender. Number 19. If Josh had been a girl, Big would have become a war. Some ideas sound bold when you first hear them. Then you sit with them for 5 more seconds and realize, no, this is not bold, this is a minefield. To me, the idea that Big was once suggested with Josh turned into a girl is exactly that kind of thing. Deborah Winger once asked Penny Marshall why she did not go in that direction, and Marshall shut it down almost immediately. I do not blame her for that one bit. In fact, I think it was one of the smartest decisions in the entire project, because the second you switch Josh's gender, Big stops being a movie that is both sweet and slightly off balance about growing up. It becomes a grenade thrown straight into the audience. And Hollywood in the late 80s loved ideas that sounded daring. The problem is, some ideas sound better and better on paper, but the second you put them on screen, they start smelling like trouble. If Josh had been female, I will say it plainly, most of the reaction to Big would not have been tenderness or emotion. It would have been controversy, backlash, criticism, then endless debate over how far the movie had gone. A movie like that does not get remembered for its heart anymore. It gets swallowed whole by the argument around it. Penny Marshall did not just avoid a strange twist. She avoided an entire storm. And what is funny is this: even after stepping away from turns big enough to blow up the whole movie, Big still had another kind of Hollywood weirdness. It made up something so believable that a whole bunch of people thought it was real. Number 18. The legendary game in Big never actually existed. Back then, I believed the Cavern of the Evil Wizard was a real game, the same way I believed the Pac-Man machine in the corner of the pizza place was real. And it was not just me. My friends, my brothers, everybody who saw Big came away asking the same innocent question: where do you play this thing? It looked exactly like a game that could exist in real life. The name was cool enough, the imagery was mysterious enough, and it had that fantasy computer game smell that felt exactly right for the late 80s. You saw it on screen, and you believed it instantly, no questions asked. Then, years later, I found out Hollywood had fooled me so beautifully, I had to laugh. The Cavern of the Evil Wizard never existed. It was created specifically for Big by David Satin and SMA Video Inc. Honestly, that is the kind of thing that makes me both admire them and feel a little sad. Admire them because they built a fake object that looked so real, an entire generation swallowed it whole. Sad because the little boy in me really did want to drop quarters into that machine and play until somebody dragged me home. But Big did not stop there. After tricking us with something that never existed, it also dropped into the frame something that was real in everyday life, but looked like it had been made up out of a childhood dream. Number 17. The little Lambo in Big was not a toy. This may be the best proof of just how much Hollywood was willing to spend back then. You glance at it and think, oh, just a fun little kid car for the frame. No. That tiny Lamborghini Countach in Big was not some prop meant to dress up the shot. It was the real thing. That car was one of around 20 models built by Agostini Auto in Italy at a scale of 1:1, 5 fully functional, and it took more than 450 hours to complete. The second I read that, I knew we were no longer talking about a toy. This was the kind of thing grown men would stop and stare at, while kids probably had no choice but to swallow hard. And the wildest part is here. Similar cars years later were auctioned for somewhere around $45,000 to $60,000. A child's car, priced like a serious collector's item. And funny enough, that is how it goes. On screen, everything sparkles like a dream. But off camera, the making of Big was not nearly as smooth as it looked. Let us go straight to number 16, because I want to tell you a very strange backstage story. Number 16. Penny Marshall. Almost fired the cinematographer. If you only look at Big on screen, would you ever guess that this soft, graceful movie, a movie that feels almost like it does not have a single extra edge on it anywhere, got so tense in the very first week that Penny Marshall wanted to replace the cinematographer altogether? I would not have. And that is exactly why, when I learned Barry Sonnenfeld once said she tried to fire him after just the first week of production, I almost laughed, because it is so completely Hollywood. That is what I've always found fascinating about classic movies. The audience looks up at the screen and assumes everything must have flowed like silk. Not at all. A lot of times that polished feeling is born out of friction disagreement personalities, strong enough that after just 1 week, people already want to throw each other off the movie. The studio finally did not let it happen. And when you think about it, it is almost funny. A movie about innocence, childhood, and magic had a first week rough enough to shake up the whole crew. Number 15. The boss in Big had a real-life original. Every time I go back to Big, I always enjoy Macmillan. Not because he has a pile of unforgettable lines or some huge, flashy scene. I like him because of that presence. A rich, powerful man standing in the middle of a toy empire, and yet in his eyes, there is still the excitement of a child who never quite finished growing up. That kind of character can turn fake in a heartbeat if you do it wrong. And yet Robert Loggia walks in and makes you believe he could run the whole store and still run off to test a new toy that same afternoon. Then, I found out one detail that suddenly made everything snap into place. The character was built around Peter Harris, the CEO of FAO Schwartz at the time. Suddenly you understand why Macmillan feels so real. He does not feel like a boss somebody dreamed up at a desk. He feels like the kind of man who really did make a living selling dreams to children, and who understood perfectly well that a toy store does not just sell products, it sells the feeling of standing in front of wonder. Number 14. These two men refuse to hand the piano scene. Over to stunt doubles. Just picture this. On the day they were shooting the most famous piano scene in Big Tom Hanks, and Robert Loggia walk onto the set and find two men dressed exactly like them already standing there waiting. Not hard to understand. Those were the stunt doubles brought in case the two actors could not pull off the stepping. The timing and the movement needed to make the whole thing feel both precise and childlike. Only those two men did not want to hand it over. According to Robert Loggia, his goal and Hanks's goal was to perform that whole routine themselves without letting anybody else step in for them. And what I love about that is how perfectly it fits the spirit of Big. That scene looks weightless in the movie, as if two grown men suddenly forgot their age and started playing inside a giant toy store. But the reason it has to look that effortless is exactly why it is so hard. You do not just need the right steps, you need every step to feel spontaneous, as if the whole thing just happened right there on the spot. And funny enough, the more natural that scene looks, the less you realize that behind Big was a production that loved doing things again and again, loved trying different versions, and loved keeping moments that looked like pure spontaneity. Number 13. Big had to be shot. Again and again. There is something I think a lot of people who watch Big all feel the same way about this movie, feels very natural. Tom Hanks's performance has that quality of a man living in the moment, not acting. Everything looks like it is simply happening. But that is the most beautiful illusion this movie creates. Penny Marshall did not believe in a perfect take. She kept shooting over and over so much that Tom Hanks once told David Moscow there were days when he had to do as many as 55 takes for a single scene. The minute I hear that, I feel tired on his behalf. But there is more. Elizabeth Perkins also said that in the party scene alone, Hanks threw out around 15 different improvised bits, which means that feeling of wow, this is so natural that we get from the movie is actually the result of a whole process of trying, failing, keeping, and then choosing the exact moment that had the most life in it. And if you think the shoot itself was winding enough, trust me, the journey to finding the right person to play Josh in the first place was even messier. Number 12. The role of Josh took a very strange trip before it came back to Tom Hanks. People talk about Tom Hanks in Big as if it was obvious from the very beginning, as if Josh had been born for him. But no, this role took a very strange trip, and while it was out wandering, the whole movie almost turned into something completely different. At first, yes, Hanks was the first choice. But then he got tied up with Dragnet and Punchline, and just like that, the door temporarily closed. That is when Robert De Niro came in. And this is where things really start getting interesting, not in a casual fill-in for now kind of way. The script actually started being adjusted to fit De Niro. Josh was no longer leaning toward the bewildered boy we know. He started leaning towards something more urban, sharper, a little rougher around the edges, and that whirlpool pulled other people with it. David Moscow was not originally auditioning for young Josh the way we might imagine, because he did not look like De Niro. So he got pushed in a different direction. Then once De Niro left, Hanks came back, and only then was Moscow called back in to read for the actual role of young Josh. Everything fell back into place, almost at the last minute. Number 11. 1. Kiss. Almost ruined the ending of Big. Some movies do not stumble in the big scenes. They stumble on a very small detail, right at the exact moment when you think everything is already fine. Big almost fell into exactly that trap, because of one kiss. According to the original script, in the final scene, Susan was going to kiss Josh on the lips. That sounds ordinary enough, but if you stop for 1 second and really think about it, you immediately feel something is off. This whole movie walks a very thin line between innocence and adulthood, and the ending is where it has to land softly, exactly right. Just shift it a little too far, and the whole feeling changes color. Elizabeth Perkins understood that. She did not want a kiss on the lips. She chose a kiss on the forehead. And I think that was one of the most delicate decisions in the whole movie. Because that kiss stops being romantic. It becomes a goodbye. Something softer, a little sad, but right. It keeps Big from stepping over the line it had worked so hard to hold from beginning to end. Number 10. Jon Lovitz. Thought the role was too small, then had to think again. For Jon Lovitz, Big was at first just a workday that did not go very well. During filming, he came down with the flu, a real flu, the kind that put him out for about 1 week. And in his mind at the time, Scotty Brennan was just a small supporting part, nothing worth worrying about too much. Just another job, finish it, and move on. And then later, Lovitz looked back and regretted it. Not regretted it because he missed out on a big role. He regretted not realizing he was inside a movie where even the small parts had their own place. That is the very gentle little irony of movies. Some roles you think just pass by. Then time goes on, and you realize you managed to leave a footprint somewhere other people never forgot. And if you think little things like that are only on the edges, Big has a way of proving the opposite. Sometimes all it takes is one very small detail, like the way a child walks, to shape an entire character. Number 9. The way a child walked helped create. Josh. If you asked me what the hardest thing about playing Big was, I would not say the lines or the emotions. I would say the body. Because you cannot just act like a child. You have to make your whole body move off rhythm, as if it never really belonged in that size. And Tom Hanks did that from one tiny detail most viewers never even notice. David Moscow, the boy who played young Josh, had a slightly unusual walk, a kind of duck walk, because his feet were growing fast, and his shoes did not fit. It was a very real thing, very accidental. But Hanks noticed it, and he kept it. He asked to wear oversized shoes to recreate that feeling. He chose Converse because they changed the way he stepped, the way he held his balance. And just like that, grown Josh started moving like a child shoved into an adult body, not an adult pretending to be a child. That was the difference. Number 8. The source of Josh's genius idea. There is a moment in Big that has always felt very true to childhood to me. Josh is sitting there, eyes lighting up, and he starts talking about an incredibly awesome idea: robots that can transform into giant prehistoric insects. Just hearing it sounds cool already. And the way he says it, the way he believes in it, is exactly how a child sounds when he thinks he has just come up with the greatest thing in the world. But if you grew up around toy shelves in the late 80s, you may have a different reaction. You tilt your head a little and think, hold on, this sounds awfully familiar, because that description almost perfectly matches the Insecticons from the Transformers toy line, which had already appeared a few years earlier. Robots that turned into insects, weird and cool at the same time, and exactly the sort of thing kids of that era loved. Number 7. Big did not exist in just one version. The way you think. A lot of people grew up with the theatrical cut around 104 minutes long. A neat, very smooth movie, almost like a modern fairy tale. But out there, another version exists too, an extended cut that runs around 130 minutes. And that is not just extra scenes for fun. It changes the feeling of the movie. The longer cut gives more room to Billy, to Josh's mother, and especially to Susan. It makes the story feel less like a simple piece of magic and a little closer to real life. The relationships have more space to breathe, to reveal sides the shorter version never quite touches. And the anniversary DVD even includes 8 deleted scenes, adding up to more than 13 minutes, like little pieces of memory that had been left behind. Number 6. The famous piano scene was rehearsed on cardboard. If you remember the piano scene in Big only as a moment of magic, Let me gently ruin that illusion for just a second. Before it became magic, it looked pretty funny. There were no warm lights, no music rising up, no glowing toy store. Just Tom Hanks and Robert Loggia standing on the floor in front of piano keys made out of cardboard, practicing step by step like two men learning a very strange dance. They were not rehearsing to make it pretty. They were rehearsing so they would not have to think anymore. Every footstep, every shift in rhythm, every exact stomp on the right key, it was all repeated again and again until the body remembered it on its own. So that by the time the cameras rolled, they could forget all the technical stuff and just play. And that is when the magic we remember finally appeared. It did not come from randomness. It came from being prepared so thoroughly that it looked like no preparation at all. Number 5. Big made Penny. Marshall, the first female director, with a movie that grossed more than $100 million. This movie did not just give Tom Hanks a career-defining role, it did something much bigger for Penny Marshall too. With Big, she became the first female director to make a movie that passed the $100 million mark at the box office. That sounds simple when you say it fast, but for Hollywood at that time, that was a real table-pounding moment. And the part I love even more is this. Big was not the kind of movie that walked in looking loud, aggressive, and eager to announce it was making history. It was warm, graceful, a little innocent, a little sad, and out of that seemingly gentle surface, Penny Marshall did something an entire old system had never been willing to believe a woman could do. She did not ask anyone to open the door. She opened it herself with a hit. Audiences genuinely loved, critics genuinely respected, and the box office could not argue with. Number 4. Big lived a second life on stage. Some movies feel the moment you finish them like they belong only to the screen. The camera, the editing, the angles, all of it is part of that particular magic. But Big was different. The first time I saw it, I already had the feeling that the movie had something very performative about it. It had rhythm. It had moments that popped it. Had emotions big enough to fill a crowded room. And sure enough, it would not stay put. In 1996, Big was brought to Broadway at the Shubert Theater with Daniel Jenkins playing Josh. The production ran for 193 performances and was even nominated for Tony Awards for Best Book and Best Original Score. Once you hear that, you understand. This was not some casual experiment. This was Big truly stepping into another form of life. Number 3. Big was turned down by a whole string of directors. There is something about Big that always strikes me as both funny and hard to believe. This movie passed through the hands of a whole list of directors, and if just one of them had said yes, the Big we know today might not exist at all. Richard Donner? No. Frank Oz? No. Ivan Reitman? No. Amy Heckerling? No. John Hughes? Also no. Read that list again. Those are not people looking for a break. Those are people who already knew how to make hits, already had their own voice, already had every reason to pick only the projects they believed in. And somehow, every one of them looked at Big and passed. That is when I always find movies becoming truly fascinating, because it reminds you that the most talented people do not always recognize the right thing. And not every great idea shows itself immediately. Some scripts have to survive a lot of head shaking, a lot of missed chances before they finally reach the right person. Number 2. The movie was screened at Camp David for President Ronald Reagan. Big is the movie with the strange wish machine, the boy who wakes up in an adult body, and the giant piano dance in the toy store. That is the image you carry of it. But at the same time, Big was also a movie that was brought to Camp David to be screened for President Ronald Reagan. That contrast alone is enough to make me love this fact. Just think about it. A movie that feels so light, so full of childhood games, almost like a modern fairy tale, and it winds up going straight into a place associated with security power and the biggest decisions in America. At that point, it is no longer just a sweet movie. That is when you realize Big had moved beyond the boundary of ordinary entertainment. Number 1. Big did not just succeed. It changed Tom Hanks's life for good. I have always loved this beautiful little irony. Big is a movie about a boy who wakes up in an adult body. And then that very movie became the thing that made Tom Hanks wake up in the eyes of all Hollywood as a truly grown-up star. When Big came out, Hanks was still shooting. The Burbs. I absolutely love that image. An actor still going to work every day like normal, still standing on set, still wearing wardrobe, still waiting for his turn. While out there, the movie he has just released is starting to make the whole industry turn its head and look again. The praise started rolling in. The admiration started rolling in. And by all accounts, Hanks even brought magazines onto the set to show the cast and crew. That detail alone makes me like him even more. It is so human, so real, and so exactly right for a Tom Hanks who was still on the way up. Then, when The Burbs came out the following year, the Oscar nomination for Best Actor for Big had just been announced too. People believe that push made the heat around Hanks rise even higher. But to me, the most memorable part is not the box office effect. It is that moment when a movie stops being only a hit. It becomes a turning point. The idea of this movie, if you say it, plainly sounds very simple. A boy wishes he were grown up. That is it. But out of that idea, that sounds almost too simple. They created a story that is still alive even now. And the deeper you dig, the more you realize that all around it is a whole layer of strange details, almost turns tiny choices that kept the movie standing. Every scene is hiding a secret. That is why I built this channel. And right now, if you love that feeling too, that feeling of discovering familiar things again in a strange new way, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to the channel.